The last problem with atheism I'd like to talk about relates to some of the experiences that lie at the core of our religious traditions, and perhaps not all religions, but most, I would think. This experience is often referred to under the banner of things like spirituality and mysticism, and is described in what has come to be known as spiritual or mystical literature. Now, those of you who have read The End of Faith know that I don't entirely line up with Dan and Christopher and Richard in my discussion of these topics, so I think I should talk about this for a moment. While I always use words like spiritual and mystical in scare quotes, and I try to denude them of metaphysics, my email suggests that many of my brothers and sisters in arms find my interest in these topics problematic, so I want to go into this in a little bit of detail. First, let me just describe the general phenomenon I'm talking about. A person, in whatever culture he finds himself, one day notices that life is difficult. He notices that in the best of times, even in the best of times, no one close to him has died. There are no hostile armies massing in the distance. The fridge is stocked with beer, and the weather is just so. Even when things are going as well as they can go, he notices that at the level of his attention, moment to moment, he is seeking happiness and only finding temporary relief from his search. And we've all noticed this, and we seek pleasant sights and sounds and tastes and sensations and attitudes. We become connoisseurs of art and music and literature. But our pleasures are, by their very nature, fleeting. I mean, the best we can do is merely reiterate them as often as we are able. If we enjoy some great professional success, this remains vivid and intoxicating to us for about an hour, maybe a day. But then people begin to ask you, well, what are you going to do next? You know, don't you have something in the pipeline? Steve Jobs releases the iPhone. I'm sure it wasn't 20 minutes before someone came up to him and said, when are you going to make this thing smaller? Now, notice at this juncture, very few people say, oh, I'm done. I've met all my goals, and now I'm just going to stay here and eat ice cream until I die in front of you. Even when things have gone as well as they can go, the search for happiness, the effort required to keep boredom and dissatisfaction and doubt at bay continues. At the very least, death and the loss of loved ones interrupts regularly even the most well-ordered and gratifying life. So in this context, many people have begun to wonder whether or not a different form of well-being, a deeper form of well-being exists, a form of well-being that is not contingent upon merely reiterating one's pleasures and avoiding one's pains. Is there a form of happiness that is not contingent upon always having one's favorite food available to be placed on one's tongue, or having one's friends and family within arm's reach, or having good books to read, or having something to look forward to on the weekend? Is it possible to be happy before anything happens, before one's desires get gratified, in the very midst of life's vicissitudes, in the very midst of old age, disease, and death? Now, I think this question lies at the periphery of everyone's consciousness. But we are all, in some sense, living our answer to this question. And many of us are living as though the answer is no. No, there is nothing more profound than seeking satisfaction, moment to moment. There's nothing more profound than reiterating your pleasures, sensory, emotional, intellectual. So many of us are living as though there's nothing to do but just keep our foot on the gas until we run out of road. But certain people, for whatever reason, wonder whether or not there's another strategy to be adopted than this. And many of them are led to wonder this by religion, by the example of people like the Buddha and Jesus and the literature that has grown up around these figures. And these people begin to practice various techniques of introspection, often called meditation or contemplation, just as a means of training their attention on their moment-to-moment experience to see if there is a deeper basis of well-being to be discovered at all. They might even go into a cave for months or years at a time, or an ashram or some other secluded spot. Why would a person do this? Well, it's actually a very simple experiment. I mean, here's the logic of it. If there is a form of happiness to be found that is not contingent upon merely reiterating your pleasures, then it should be available in a circumstance where all obvious sources of pleasure have been removed. It should be available to someone who has gone to some secluded spot in the desert or in a cave, who has declined to marry her high school sweetheart, who has renounced all of her material possessions. It should be available in a context that would on its face be deeply uncongenial to the satisfaction of ordinary desire and ordinary aspiration. Now, one clue as to how daunting most of us and most people would find such a project is that solitary confinement, which is essentially what we're talking about, is considered a punishment even inside a prison. I mean, even when confined with homicidal maniacs and rapists, most people still prefer the company of others to the prospects of being alone in a box for a significant stretch of time. And yet contemplatives for millennia claim to have found extraordinary depths of psychological well-being in circumstances very much like solitary confinement. Now, it seems to me, as rational people, whether we call ourselves atheists or not, we have a choice to make in how we view this whole enterprise. I mean, either the contemplative literature is a mere catalog of psychopathology and deliberate fraud and religious delusion, or people have been having interesting and sometimes normative experiences under the banner of mysticism and spirituality. Now, let me just assert on the basis of my own study and experience that I have no doubt that certain people have improved their self-understanding and their ethical intuitions, and even made genuine discoveries about the nature of subjectivity itself through traditional practices like meditation. I mean, leaving aside all the metaphysics and mythology and mumbo-jumbo, what contemplatives and mystics over the ages claim to have found is that there is an alternative to living at the mercy of the next neurotic thought that comes careening into consciousness. There's an alternative to being continuously spellbound by this conversation we are having with ourselves. And most of us think that if a person is walking down the street talking to himself, that is not able to censor himself in front of other people, he's probably mentally ill. But if we talk to ourselves all day long, silently, thinking, rehearsing prior conversations, thinking about what we should have said, we could have said, we might yet say, we just know enough to keep this silent, then this is perfectly normal. This is perfectly compatible with basic human sanity. Well, the experiences of contemplatives over the millennia suggest that this is not so, that there's another way of looking at this phenomenon. Now, of course, I'm by no means denying the importance of thought. I think thought is obviously indispensable for us. It's the basis of most culture. It's certainly the basis of all science. It's the basis of all of our social relationships. And linguistic thought is surely responsible for much rudimentary cognition. I mean, it's responsible for our ability to integrate planning and explicit learning and moral reasoning in many cases. I mean, even talking to oneself out loud might serve a function occasionally. But from the point of view of our contemplative traditions, and this is to reduce them all down to a cartoon version that ignores the rather esoteric disputes between them, our habitual failure to recognize thought as thought, our habitual identification with discursive thought is a primary source of human suffering. And when a person breaks this spell, an extraordinary kind of relief is available. Now, the problem with a contemplative claim of this sort is that you can't borrow someone else's contemplative tools to test it. You have to develop your own tools. I mean, imagine if the science of astronomy if you couldn't even observe whether there was a phenomenon worth looking at unless you built your own telescope. Okay, this would be an immense barrier to establishing astronomy as a science. It wouldn't make the sky any less worthy of our investigation, but it would be an immense impediment. To judge the claims of contemplatives, we have to build our own telescope. Judging their metaphysical claims and their philosophical claims, we can use thought itself. Many of these can be dismissed as bad science or bad philosophy on their merits. But to judge whether certain experiences are possible, and if possible, desirable, we have to be able to use our attention in the requisite ways, if only for a few moments. Now, one problem with atheism, it seems to me, as a category of thought, is that it is almost synonymous with not being interested in such phenomena. It's almost synonymous with not being interested with what the Buddha or Jesus may have experienced in his life. And it seems to me that many atheists, though perhaps not all, reject such experiences out of hand as being either undesirable or impossible. Now, another common mistake is to imagine that whatever experiences these contemplatives have had, they're identical to experiences we're all familiar with. They're identical to scientific awe or aesthetic appreciation or artistic inspiration. Now, let me just say, as someone who has made his own modest efforts in this area, when someone goes into solitude for months or years at a time and trains himself in meditation for 15 to 18 hours a day, doing nothing but observe the contents of his own consciousness and try not to be lost in thought, not reading, not writing, not talking, just making a moment-to-moment effort to pay undivided attention to the arising of thought and to the arising of sensory experience. He experiences things that most scientists and artists are not familiar with unless they've made the identical introspective efforts. And these experiences have something to say about the plasticity of human experience itself and the possibilities of human happiness. So apart from just commending these phenomena to your attention, I want to say that our neglect of these phenomena as atheists puts us at a rhetorical disadvantage, because millions of people have had these experiences, and many millions more have had glimmers of them. And these experiences are often the most important and transformative moments in their lives. And if we, by definition, ignore them because of their entanglement with religion, we appear less wise than even our craziest religious opponents. Now, I don't know if the universe is, as J.B.S. Haldane said, not only stranger than we suppose, but stranger than we can suppose. But I'm pretty sure that it is stranger than we as atheists tend to represent while advocating atheism. I mean, as atheists, we tend to give people the sense, and even give ourselves the sense, that we are well on our way to purging the universe of mystery. As advocates of reason, we know that mystery is going to be with us for quite some time. In fact, there are good reasons to believe that mystery may be ineradicable from our circumstance. I mean, because however much we understand the universe, it seems like there could well always be brute facts which we can't explain, but which we must use to explain everything else. Now, this is not a problem for human life. It is not a barrier to human happiness. But we are faced with the task of convincing a myth-infatuated world that love and curiosity are sufficient, and that you don't have to delude yourself and frighten yourself with Iron Age fairy tales. This is a monumental task. I don't think there's any intellectual struggle more worthy of our efforts. But it seems to me that we should not, in this effort, fight in well-ordered ranks like the redcoats of atheism. I think this may it's worth thinking about what victory will look like. And again, the example of racism seems instructive to me. What will it look like when we finally conquer the evil of racism? Should that happy day ever dawn? It's certainly not going to be a world in which a majority of people profess themselves to be non-racist. It will very likely be a world in which the very concept of separate races has lost its meaning. I think if we win this war of ideas with religion, we will find ourselves in a world in which the concept of atheism is scarcely intelligible. It will be a concept like non-astrology. Now, I think this is a future absolutely worth fighting for. I think it may, in fact, be the only future compatible with our survival as a species. I mean, this will be a world simply where people cease to praise one another for believing things or pretending to believe things for which they have no evidence. But the only path between now and then that I can see is for us to be unremittingly honest and to advocate intellectual honesty. And it seems to me that intellectual honesty will always be more durable and deeper and more easily spread than atheism. Thank you very much.